It had to be hospitalised and underwent tests, but it was clear to the family that the hospital staff were unsure as to the cause of her condition.
They were wondering what exactly she had been taking. They had asked us quite a lot of questions about her, and because it was the liver, they obviously had to ask about alcohol use and different things like that. It was quite distressing.
Betty Kellett's liver failed and drastic measures were required.
She got a liver transplant, but it was very, very late. She was extremely unwell, and her other organs had started to fail at that stage, and it was really a desperate attempt to save her, but it didn't work.
The Kellett family were never told why their mother, just 58, had died.
I went to bereavement counselling myself, and I told them in the bereavement counselling, I have a beginning and I have a middle, but I have no end. And it's been endless. And I'm shocked that we were allowed to go through this as a family, and that there was never a cause given to us.
In fact, the cause of her death was believed to be Olin, and this was reported to the Irish Medicines Board. It was the first major signal they received about the drug's potential danger. Betty Kellett's case was even written about in the medical journal The Lancet, something the Kelletts were not aware of until we brought it to their attention 3 months ago.
We had no idea that my mother's death was suspected and was recorded and reported since 1999. None at all. It was a total shock, and the fact that this whole report was solely about my mother was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. We feel robbed. That's the best way. As my siblings and myself, we feel robbed. Her extended family, all her sisters and brothers. And our children are robbed.
By 1995, our whole system of drug licensing changed. The National Drugs Advisory Board, which was always under-resourced and accused of being too slow, was replaced by the Irish Medicines Board. The pharmaceutical industry, which we were keen to attract, were demanding faster licences, and in return were made responsible for the new regulators' funding. New European rules also meant that we were competing for business with other regulators in approving licences.
Competition is becoming central. Increasingly, regulatory policy is discussed with reference to economic competitiveness. This is where we see a drive also for speedy drug licensing, because drug companies want to have their license processed as speedily as possible. So increasingly what we're seeing is regulatory authorities being run as businesses rather than as public services.
A vital decision was now taken. Although Nimesulide had only been cleared for short-term use by patients, its makers wanted to be allowed to market it as a pain relief drug for arthritis sufferers, people who were likely to use it for months or even years on end. They argued that this new type of use wouldn't be dangerous for patients. The Irish Medicines Board agreed. In reaching that crucial decision, it relied on a number of studies, showing its similar effectiveness to other anti-inflammatories. In documents seen by Primetime, one study was described by the board as pivotal. But how reliable was it?
I suppose the striking thing is that about a third of people dropped out because of toxicity to the drug, largely stomach upsets, which was the common one. There were minor changes in liver function, but none of them went into what's called the clinically significant range.
If they did rely on that study, what does that say?
Well, in general, if a drug is going to be used year after year in an individual, you would like to have data that goes beyond 6 months before you could say this drug is going to be safe in chronic use.
So although there was very limited data for long-term or chronic use, documents seen by Primetime show that a specific warning saying that the drug should be avoided for the control of chronic osteoarthritis in the accompanying information leaflet was dropped. The Irish Medicines Board maintain, however, that extending the licence for arthritis use was in line with European norms.
Our licensing of the product for osteoarthritis at that time was totally in line with European guidelines. And in fact, if you look at the indication we actually gave it for, it wasn't for long term. We said for the symptomatic treatment of osteoarthritis as opposed to treatment of osteoarthritis where it had in other member states, and we advised, again from the information you have seen, that it should be used for the shortest duration of time at the lowest possible dose.
The problem with this is that in practice for many arthritis patients, their pain is persistent and long-term, so once prescribed a painkiller, many will keep taking it.
That is a problem because some people get an excellent response to nimesulide and obviously they'll want to continue it. And the difficulty is therefore how do you restrict this? And if you're the doctor and the patient comes in and said that's the only drug that's relieved my arthritis, what should you do?
This new licence was a turning point for the sale of the drug. Within years, over tens of thousands of arthritis patients would be using nimesulide, and the company began advertising the drug for both acute and chronic inflammatory conditions. But within a year, the Irish Medicines Board received another report of a suspected death and had by that time over 40 reports of negative side effects associated with the drug. The National Liver Unit Director, the country's leading expert in liver medicine, also wrote to them saying that he had 3 liver patients under investigation that had conditions which he thought were linked to the drug. The Irish Medicines Board undertook a review with the European Safety Working Group to decide what action needed to be taken to protect people from the potential dangers of the drug. What these documents obtained by Primetime show is that in this private forum 8 years ago, the Irish Medicines Board concluded that it may be necessary to ban the drug outright across Europe, or at least ban its use for arthritis patients. Instead, it was agreed that warnings to monitor for liver problems would be added to the drug information leaflet, and the Irish Medicines Board undertook to get Helston Biorex to carry out a safety study. Their own information suggested the problem could occur in 1 in 10,000 patients, but the study they accepted from the company had only 9,500.
In 1999, we asked the company to do an initial pilot study on 500 patients, replicating the way it was being prescribed here in Ireland and compare it with 2 other commonly prescribed products, and then to do a further study in over 9,000 patients. The risk of this product, hepatic reactions, occurs in 1 in 10,000 patients. It was properly designed at that time, replicating clinical practice here in Ireland, and the results of that study showed us that there was no safety difference between it and 2 other commonly prescribed non-steroidal analgesics.
Others say that such studies were just not large enough to reassure us about safety.
If your study isn't powerful enough, you can't conclude that a drug is safe. If, for example, as some of these drugs, they cause toxicity in 1 in 10,000 people, to be sure that you're going to find that, you need to study 30,000 people. So if you only study 9,000 people, you can't say from that liver toxicity does not occur.
According to documents released to Primetime, a European scientific assessment took the same view. They found that the study was not sufficiently powered or large enough to detect liver problems.
If you leave the design of a study to address a question that is critical to a company's future, entirely to the company, you can see right there is a flaw in the process. So really what you want is an approach where experts who don't have a dog in the race can work with the agency to help them design a rigorous study.
This was a missed opportunity to get a worthwhile and independent study about the drug's safety in wide usage. The only other way of knowing about a drug's safety once in use is by relying on doctors to report side effects on so-called yellow cards. But the system of doctors reporting what they observed to the Irish Medicines Board is notoriously poor.
Well, I don't think we can have huge confidence because we get very few yellow cards. In Ireland, we probably get less than 1 per 50,000 prescriptions.
For every 100 GPs, there are 10 reports, and every 100 hospital doctors, there are only 4, despite its vital importance for patient safety.
This is a very small number, actually. It tends to be, the same doctors tend to be reporting frequently. In our experience, the majority of doctors have never reported a side